welcome everybody to the Hall of Heroes History podcast. This is our very first episode. I'm your host, John Osborne, and with me, as always, from here on out, will be Alan Stewart.
Hi.
So we are going to be talking about preserving history, and it's going to be a fun time. We're going to tell you, our first episode is about origin stories. So we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves. We're going to also talk about the museum, and then we'll talk about the history of how DC started, how Marvel started, and we'll get all that history, and then we'll throw some comic books in there for you too. So we're here to kind of just pass along the information that we have. I say we, mostly Alan. So hopefully you guys like this, and you can like and subscribe and catch our other episodes that we'll have coming up here pretty soon. Like I said, episode 1, origin stories. And so we're going to start out by talking about why are we credible, mostly Alan. Why is Alan credible? Why should we listen to him? And all the awesome information that you have. So let's do your origin story first, Alan. Let's just start. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I was actually born here in Elkhart, Indiana, and this is where the museum's collection was founded and started. And as a kid, I had a couple of paper routes at Old Farm Apartments, and would pay my paper bill and take my paper money, and I would get on my bicycle and ride 4 miles downtown to the book stack on Lexington Street, downtown Elkhart. And they had quarter boxes, and I would take $20 every month and fill up a grocery sack with 100 comic books and pedal one arm back 4
Nice.
miles, to read my comic books. I was, we'll kind of do this like Alcoholics Anonymous. Hello, my name is Alan, and I am a comic book addict, which explains it very well.
Yes, yeah. And you have so much information. So obviously you were reading comic books. That's how you get started.
Yes.
And you got your paper route. You're buying your own comics, and you're super into it. Yeah. And then let's just kind of fast forward a little bit to where it becomes something that you're so into it. It kind of just takes over your obsession with it. And just get us there.
Obsessed is a very good word. It's a very accurate word for what I am. So our comic book that we have here at the museum kind of tells the whole 45-year history of the collection. It starts with me at like age 8, buying comic books off the old spinner rack and stuff, and then kind of goes into the whole, newspaper route and comic book thing. And then when we get to the early 90s, Hall of Heroes becomes first a comic book store here in Elkhart on South Main Street for about a year. And then we started a comic book contest. And so I did this local contest at Hall of Heroes, the first iteration, which is the comic book store. And it's, I had 5 different kids that brought in stuff, and then I had all my customers vote on these comics. So the contest was, I was going to publish 500 copies of the winner.
Right.
So we had 5 different comic books that were out front of the store, and people would, customers would come in and vote. And the winner was 16-year-old Matt Martin at Memorial High School, and who went on to work at DC and Marvel after he worked for me.
Right.
I ended up doing 1,000 copies of Vortex #1 in 1992. We sold 700 copies in a week.
Nice.
And so I'm like, I have something here.
Yeah.
And so then what we did is I was marketing manager at Elkhart Truth at the time, and so what I decided to do was to bring in more artists. So I had Matt, who was 16, Trent Kanuga, runner-up, who was 15, and I started a second title. So we started Vortex title. Then we started Hall of Heroes Presents, and we decided to turn it into a national talent search.
Okay.
And so people would send in their submissions, we would vote on them, and then we would publish it. So Hall of Heroes Presents, every issue was the first appearance of a new artist, new creator, new character.
Okay.
Which was really, it's kind of like, DC Showcase, comics, things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so it's very similar to that. And then I kind of looked into how to distribute nationally. And so we did that. So then we did Vortex. So Vortex has 2 issue #1s. We have the local one that's all black and white. The national version that we sent through to the comic book stores had only the logo colored. And so what I decided to do was to have the books black and white with only the logo colored so that they would stand out. on all the shelves.
Right.
So people would notice our books because the black and white comic would stand out among all the color covers.
Right.
So that's kind of ran the publishing company. And then I also had all my artists and writers were under age 18. And so that was another thing. So it got us a lot of national press.
Right.
Because of those things. So the publishing company did very well. Half a dozen of the guys that worked with me from 1992 to 1999 went on to work at DC and Marvel, and we became one of the top 10 small press comic book companies in the 90s back then. And then I kind of took a break from comic books.
Okay.
And started my real estate business, which I still do. That's kind of my paid gig. And then I kind of missed being in the comic book industry professionally.
I mean, you say you stopped with comic books for a little bit.
I didn't stop collecting.
You didn't stop collecting.
I didn't stop collecting, no.
Right.
I stopped being in the business professionally.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And so then a couple years later, I missed it. And then a lot of people know Craig, who was on Fast and Loud with me. He was one of the ones that helped me co-found the museum.
Right.
And so Craig and I started the museum together, and I did this crazy thing, and I built this Hall of Justice in my backyard because it was Super Friends was my favorite cartoon.
Yeah.
So I always wanted the Hall of Justice because it's so cool.
Yeah.
You know. Meanwhile, back at the Hall of Justice.
Yeah.
You know. And so I built a Hall of Justice replica in my backyard, which was like crazy. You
Right.
know. And I had 5 contractors that I talked to about this project, and 4 of them thought I was just a nut job.
Right. You are.
And I am a little nutty. But then the 5th one saw my vision. And he's like, oh my God, I love Super Friends.
Yeah.
And so that's the guy who got the gig,
Yeah.
because he saw my vision, he knew what I wanted.
Right.
And so we did. We built it. We built the Hall of Justice. It's like, you build it, they'll come. And they did.
Yeah.
And Stan Lee came. So I built this replica of the Hall of Justice in my backyard just to house the collection, share it with people. I also had my real estate office in the building too. That all changed. So the museum was built and started in 2007. So we're coming up on our 18-year anniversary this year. And in 2012, Stan Lee came out, filmed 2 of his 8 episodes of his Superfan television series, got us on the national map. And we've now been on a dozen national television shows up to now. And so we're on a national TV show about every year now. And it's become the largest collection in the world. And, we bring celebrities here all the time.
Right.
And we have Comic-Con every year. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's, we're the only comic book and superhero museum in the United States.
Right. So here's my question to you: is back to the credibility. Yes, you did all those things. You had the publishing company. You create the building in your backyard, and all this stuff. So the whole time you're reading comics.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The whole time you're reading comics. And I'll just let everyone know that this man has a mind like a steel trap. It is insane how much information he has.
Right.
Now, that's because of your reading. Was there any research, and you're considered a comic book historian, how do you get that title? Do you send away for it?
No.
Okay.
There's no degree. There's
Okay.
no degree.
Okay. No, you didn't-
I do hold a degree in secondary education and history, so I
Right.
do have degrees.
Right.
But there's no comic historian degree. The only reason is I've probably read more comic books than anybody else. I mean, it's just that simple.
Right.
Because our museum's collection of 75,000 comics, I've read them all.
Right. I know.
Yeah, but I do go around to Comic-Cons and universities, and I do, I lecture and I talk about comic book history because I love it, I'm passionate about it, but not only the comics and the characters, but the creators themselves. That's something we try to do is preserve those legacies.
So that's not anything you can really learn by reading the comic. I mean, I know you can read the name of who what the artist was and who the writer is and stuff like that. But I mean, you have information that, even is behind that kind of stuff.
Right.
Is that you just reading other books, wanting to have that information?
There's a lot of, over probably the last, 10, 20 years, you've seen more of these biographies.
Right.
And, history type books.
And
that are coming out
encyclopedias.
now that talks about these things.
Right.
Talks about these people. The American Comic Book Chronicles is a series I definitely recommend them. If you're interested in comic book history, definitely get those. They have done editions from 1940 through the 90s. And I've read all of them. They're great. They talk about the creators. They talk about the characters. they really but they also tie it into current historical events.
Right.
So yeah, Tomorrow's Publishing is the one that puts it out. That's called American Comic Book Chronicles. They're about $50 each hardback, and they've come out with about 9 editions of those. But they're really great reads. They're timeline order, which is kind of how I like things.
Oh yeah.
I like to read things in historical order.
Right.
And so those have been fantastic. Those books.
That's cool. So that, I mean, yeah, you have so much information, and the idea that you also appraise things.
Yes.
So you've been around it for so long that people can come to you and go, how much is this worth? And you can kind of do a little bit of research. Sometimes you don't have to do any research.
Right.
Because you kind of just already know how much that kind of stuff goes
Yep,
for.
exactly.
So much so that you are an advisor to the American Pickers.
Yes.
When they find things, they call Alan
Yep.
to find out how much those things are worth, or if they even should consider buying it.
Yes, I mean, and kind of how that works, and we'll do an episode basically on collecting, on appraising. That'll be a future episode, and I'll talk more in detail about my work with Mike and his crew at American Pickers.
Yeah.
And I've worked with them for the last 4 seasons.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's basically your origin story as a kid, buying comics and paper route, and then publishing and building your museum, building your, your.
I'm just a
utopia.
comic book nerd that
Right.
has done well.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's
no.
pretty much it.
And that's awesome. My origin story is a little shorter.
Well, I'm
And
older
it's
than
not,
you.
that's barely. But no, I mean, mine is more of just your average Joe type of guy who enjoys comics. Now, the one thing about me is that I didn't really read comics when I was a kid, right? You know that about me, is that, but when I got a little bit older, when I was in high school, I started reading Sherlock Holmes. And I really enjoyed Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And then I went into the Army. And when I got into the Army, you can't just take a giant book out there with you.
No, you can't.
So I liked to read. So comic books fit right in your pocket.
Right.
And you can put them in your, rucksack.
And they sell them at the
that kind of-
PX.
And they sell them at the PX,
Yep.
the NEX, depending on what, branch of
Right,
service you're in.
exactly, yeah.
So I would do that, and I'd take them out there, and with any kind of downtime that we would have, I would read Batman, because Batman is an easy jump from Sherlock to Batman.
Oh, easy, yeah.
And that's what I liked. I like detective type of things.
They did a Batman story where he teamed up with Sherlock Holmes.
I do know that. So yeah, the Army. Then I started getting into Batman, and I started reading some other comics that kind of interest me, and then I stopped. And I didn't read anything for a little while, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine who was really into comics, he was like, you got to start getting back into comics. You'll love it, And I know you have you're mad about the New 52, but the New 52 is where I started back up.
Right.
And so I started reading. I mean, I grabbed Flash, Superman, Batman.
Sure.
Wonder Woman was like one of my absolute favorites, and so I started getting back into that, and that led me into wanting to know about the history of comics for some reason.
Right.
I really just wanted to understand more about this this whole medium.
That's why you started working here, because we're the place that has that.
Well, yeah, and so, but then my origin story also goes to the fact that Alan sold me my first house.
Yep.
So that is how we got to know each other.
And that was like 25 years ago?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
It was a while ago, yeah.
So he sold me my first house, and I go over to sign the papers at the Hall of Justice. I pull into his driveway, and I'm like, what in the world is this? Because you lived off of like a little bit of a back road.
Yeah, I lived out in the county.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
country, yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's just trees, houses, trees, Hall of Justice.
Yep, it's
And
like,
I'm like, who is this dude? And so I go in, sign the papers, and you have all this huge collection. You showed it to me, and I was like, this is amazing. Then we became friends after that. And I kept visiting the museum. I brought a bunch of people to the museum, and then it just ended up that a couple of years ago you hired me to, some years back you hired me to kind of interview the celebrities at the Comic-Con.
Yeah, being our moderator, our stage that runs the stage for Comic-Con.
Yep.
And you
I
have done
did
very
that.
well with that.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. It's absolutely so much fun. But then that led to I was working at another place that the whole place shut down, and they closed every one of those stores. and I was looking for a place, and you didn't know that, and you were like, you just happened to go, hey, we're in need of somebody here at the museum. Are you available? And I go, yes, I actually am available. This is perfect timing.
Yep.
So, and then as I started working here, and I don't know if you did this on purpose, I feel like you did, up at the front desk at the museum, there would just be like encyclopedias like laid about and little things like you were just talking about,
Right.
like those things just laying around.
Yep.
And I was like, he's probably wanting me to read these. And so
Actually, some of them I was reading.
right,
Some
I
of
knew
them.
you were
Yeah,
reading
I was
some.
reading some of
but
those,
yeah, so I thought, you know what, if he's reading it, I should read it. If I'm going to work at the museum, I
Right.
should know as much as feasibly possible.
Yeah.
So I started reading those
And
encyclopedias.
it's fun research.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
I absolutely
It's not
love
a
it.
boring, dry textbook at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically our origin stories. I
Yeah.
learned, and I continue to learn a lot from Alan to try to become the best tour guide I can here at the Hall of Heroes Museum. So that's basically our origin stories. Now you know why maybe you should listen to Alan, and why you should maybe
And somebody needs to tell my wife that.
right. And I don't think it's going to happen.
Probably not.
No.
She's actually smarter than I am.
Well,
Not about this, but
right. Everything else
in general. Yes, everything else. She's
Everything
smarter
else,
than me. Yes, exactly.
So now, let's get into the meat and potatoes
Yeah.
of what this podcast is really about.
Exactly.
And that is comic book history.
Yep.
And it is, he's putting on gloves, he's not
Rubber
going to kill
glove
me.
time.
He's not going to kill me.
Yeah, I'm not going to kill John. No, not killing John.
So,
But the first piece we're going to talk about is a mandatory glove only
Yes.
to touch this thing.
this is the very first, what is considered to be the very first comic book.
Yes, exactly.
And one of the reasons that it's considered to be the first comic book is because it's one of the first ones that has the pictures and text
Yes.
within the picture.
Right.
So it's kind of considered the very first comic book.
Yeah, and really, it's you can kind of really compare it to a graphic novel.
Right.
Yeah. So the history of this piece, and this is not currently on exhibit in the museum. We're working on having the exhibit for it sometime this year. But this here, it's extremely old, and so this particular book here is from 1837, from France. It is called The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck. And it was, again, France in 1837. It was reprinted 5 years later in 1842 in New York. And so this is, it's a hardback, and you can just kind of see like the illustrations and everything there. But yeah, this is the first comic book. It's more set up, like I said, like a graphic novel. But this is the first comic book. It's obviously the oldest comic book in our collection. Actually belongs to one of our board members who bought this. I think Steve bought this 2 years ago.
Year and a half, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but this is the first comic book, and it's very cool that we have one. So you guys get to see it for the first time because it's been in our vault, and we've not put it out because we haven't figured out exactly how we want to exhibit it yet.
Well, I'm putting together that one exhibit about comic books across internationally. So when I was doing the research for that, I found out about that comic, and I go, wouldn't it be really cool if we had that? And Steve goes, oh, you mean this? And he pulls it out, and I
Right,
see it, and I was
exactly,
like,
yep.
you actually have that? It's amazing. So it was really cool to find out that we had that, and that I've been working here, and it had been here the entire time. So that was really cool. And so
Very
that's
cool,
considered the very first comic book.
First
graphic
comic book,
novel.
yep.
And so that's what gets us kicked off, and then we go to...
So then we
this.
go to, so Amazing Adventures. These are considered pulps. So the pulps are a little different. Pulps don't have a lot of graphics inside. They're mainly text. But in Amazing Adventures, this is where you have, in the early pulps, this is where Conan the Barbarian is actually first introduced.
Okay.
Is in the pulps. And just, some of the other early characters that you see in the pulps. But yeah, so pulps are kind of the precursors of comic books, and they were pretty much prevalent in the 1920s and 30s. And then you go into the actual comics. So the first, so then we'll kind of go into now DC and Marvel, their first comics. So DC was first in 1935. We do not have a copy of this. It's called New Fun Number 1. It came out in 1935. And actually, Siegel and Schuster worked on New Fun Comics #1 in 1935. Superman came out 3 years later in Action Comics #1 in 1938.
Right.
So before Superman, Siegel and Schuster Superman was not their first published work.
Right.
They
had
created the character in high school.
Right.
So it was their first creation, no doubt. But they actually worked on New Fun #1, DC's very first comic book.
And then they decided, let's that character that we came up with in high school,
Right.
we should do something about
Exactly. Yeah, they worked for DC for a couple of years, and they finally made the pitch. They actually made the pitch for Superman for several different companies, and they were just turned down over and over and over again. So then they worked at DC. DC was originally known as National Allied Publication from 1935 to 1937, and then it became DC in 1937. The one thing a lot of people ask me, does DC stand for Detective Comics? Yes, it does. That answer is yes. So DC is Detective Comics. Detective Comics was like their second title after New Fun.
Right. New Fun was first. And then
New Fun was first, then Detective.
But
Yep.
detective things were really big back then.
Yes.
It's like,
Well,
like
they were big in the pulps.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
the pulps detective stories were huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like in the 50s, you get a lot of westerns and stuff like
Right,
that. Before
exactly.
that, it was a lot of detective stuff and like
Exactly.
mysteries and stuff. People were really into that.
Yep, exactly.
So they just kind of went with what people enjoyed.
Right, exactly. Because, Batman didn't come into the picture until issue 27.
Right.
So Detective Comics comes out, and it's not till 1939, that Batman shows up a year
Right.
after Superman. Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson was the founder of DC Comics.
Okay.
So people know that. You've got the pulp. Yeah, you've got the pulps here, and those, like I said, those are the precursors to comics.
And then we have the very first superhero.
Yep, which
And
is Superman, Action Comics #1 in 1938
Yeah.
by
And,
Siegel and Schuster.
and Superman, it's a huge deal because in other countries and other places that you go in comic books, there's no superheroes. There's no people with powers. A lot of other international comic books are they're taken from America. They actually have heroes that are American heroes, not from their own country.
Right.
And then they have like other kind of goofy characters and some funny and
Right.
stuff like that. It's almost exclusive to America to have superhumans.
You do have some characters. So I'll give you an example. They're not really superhuman, but like the Phantom.
Yes,
So the Phantom came out 2 years before Superman in 1936.
but as a comic strip.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he also appeared in the comic books. But he actually, so like how Superman is so popular in America, the Phantom is like that in Australia.
Right.
Yeah, so the Phantom is huge in Australia. Most of his stuff is there.
Well, and he's the very first costumed hero.
Yes, that's
not
correct.
superpowered hero, but
Right.
costumed hero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. Superman's considered the first superhero with powers.
Yeah.
But the Phantom's considered the first masked superhero.
So we get Action Comics. Now we were just talking about DC.
Yep.
So Action Comics is what? A side.
It's a different title. So you had, so DC launched with New Fun, and then with Detective, and then they had Action Comics and Adventure Comics, and so they just start cranking out different titles.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that's why we get Action Comics
Right.
brought to you by
Exactly.
DC.
Right. And so like Superman was the first character to get his own title in 1939. Superman #1 comes out, and then in 1941, Batman #1 comes out.
Yeah.
So you've got, so Superman and Batman were the first ones to get their own title, that they weren't just one of like 8 or 10 stories.
Within one book.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So like Action Comics had Superman, it had Zatanna's father, Crimson Avenger was in Detective Comics. But yeah, you just have all these different stories.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. That's interesting.
Mhm.
So that's basically DC.
Right, exactly.
That's the beginning. That's the origin of DC, and now we'll move to Marvel.
Marvel.
Which so you got Superman in 38, right, and then
Yep.
you got Batman in
39, a year later. Yep.
Yep.
And then Marvel starts in 39 also.
Right.
Yep. So Marvel Comics, which was originally known as Timely Comics, and was created by Martin Goodman, who was actually Stan Lee's uncle. So that's how Stan got into Marvel, that his Uncle Marty was the founder.
You know, I
Marvel.
knew that name. I did not know. This is why I like talking to you.
Right.
every once in a while.
You have to.
because I get to learn. Like I didn't know that was his uncle. I never even put it together.
Right, exactly,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Okay, that's why you got into it.
Yeah, it's really funny because a lot of people, because Captain America: First Avenger, everybody thinks that Captain America was Marvel's first character. He was actually their third character. 2 years later in 41. In Marvel Comics #1, 1939, you had the introduction of the Human Torch.
Mm-hmm. Who's an android.
He's an android, yeah, not the Fantastic Four Human Torch, but the android Human Torch. He was created by Carl Burgos, created the Human Torch, and Bill Everett created the Submariner. Interesting thing about Submariner, everybody thinks Submariner was a ripoff of Aquaman. The reverse is true.
3 years.
Exactly, yeah. Aquaman came out in 42, Submariner came out in 39, so actually DC ripped off Timely to create Aquaman.
It's just that Aquaman took off more.
He's the more well-known of the aquatic superheroes. Yes, absolutely, he is. But not in this time period. Submariner was hugely popular, during World War II.
Right.
What's really cool, so when you come to the museum, we have a huge art collection. And what we do is not only preserve the history, but we try to preserve the legacies of the creators. So one of the new art pieces that we got 2 years ago, Bill Everett, who created Namor the Submariner, we actually have an original, this is an original Bill Everett page, an original Bill Everett Submariner page from 1967. But this is an original page, Marvel's first artist, Marvel's first creator. So this is just huge because Bill Everett died in 73. So, he died early.
Right.
So there's not a lot of his original work out there. So this was done 5 years before he had passed. But this is like a big get for our art collection.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel's first artist, Marvel's first character.
It would be for anybody's collection.
Right,
for
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's really cool that we can share that with people and we share the history. It's not just comic books. It's the creators. It's the history. It's the art. It's even the toys, which are cool. It's the animation cells from the cartoons.
Right.
Hollywood memorabilia. We cover all of that, the whole 85-year history. We tried to cover it in all of that stuff, which is pretty amazing.
I think it's interesting that Marvel's first two characters is fire and water.
Yes, elementals.
Yes,
exactly.
It's elementals.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I always just find that interesting that that's how they came up with their characters.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, they have Captain America, where did you even come up with?
Captain America became their most popular character during World War II, of course. So a lot of you know, because this was made national news, March of 2023, we had a robbery here at the museum. And of course it made national news that our Captain America #1 was stolen. We had $1.5 million of rare books stolen. We are happy to announce that the Captain America #1 was returned 2 weeks ago. So this is our Captain America #1, our key book is back. It will not be on permanent exhibit. You can come see the book. We will have it on exhibit at our Captain America Day, which is going to be February the 8th. So you can see the Captain America #1, and just for that day only. And then it's going back to the bank vault.
How do we know that that's ours? How do we know that this is the one that was stolen from the museum?
That's actually really easy. So what we've got is you're going to see right here the Bonnet Bookstore stamp. Ours is the only copy that has that. And this is where it was. And Bonnet bookstores actually still exist. Because when we got the book, I actually Googled it and looked them up, and I called them and said, hey, I sent them photos, and they put it on their website.
Right.
That, hey, this museum has a Captain America #1 that originally came from our store in 1941. I mean, they sold it new.
Yeah.
And so they were like really excited that their bookstore stamp is on our Captain America #1.
Yeah.
Because we're one of only 2 museums that you can see Captain America #1. Here, Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. has one. Theirs is not on exhibit all the time.
Right.
Ours won't be on exhibit all the time, obviously due to the robbery.
Right.
This was the main book that the thieves were after. We are still missing about $200,000 worth of rare books. Our Hulk 1 and 2 is still missing. Our Giant Size X-Men, our X-Men #1.
So you can be our hero.
Yes, absolutely. So be on the lookout for those books. That we're going to do we will do an episode on the whole robbery, the details.
We're going to
reenact
the whole
robbery.
thing.
Yep.
I'm going to wear them. I'm sorry. No.
Bring a baseball bat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was we'll do a future episode talking about all that. The gentleman was sentenced 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
which is how we got the Cap #1 back. That he turned it over trying to get a plea bargain on the robbery, but he still
Is it the
has
first time that a comic book has ever been put up as a
right.
That's hilarious. Could you lower my sentence? I'll show you where the Cap 1 is.
Right,
You know,
exactly,
like-
yes.
yeah, that's hilarious.
But yeah, we'll definitely do a future episode talking about the robbery, kind of where it's at, because we still have some missing books. Right now, we're working with the prosecutor's office to get him brought here for trial. So then he'll plea bargain to try to return the rest of our books.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that happened. Yeah, when
Yeah.
we found out that we had that at the very end of last year.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the last things that happened from last year, and you
Right.
messaged me almost right
Right
away.
around the holidays, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
and you were like, "Check this out," and I was
Uh-huh.
like, "What?" That's all. What a great way to end the year.
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, kind of a great way to end the podcast right there.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
On
we
a
talked
high
about
note.
on a high
Yeah.
note that we got our Cap 1 back, and so
Yeah.
it's very cool.
Yeah.
We went over origin stories of us,
Yeah.
origin story of the Hall of Heroes Superhero Museum that's here in Elkhart, Indiana. You can see the banner. Come and check us out whenever you get a chance. I always tell everybody before they leave, tell all the nerds about us.
Right,
Send me a
exactly.
whole
Yeah.
herd of nerds.
Comic-Con
'Cause-
this year is May 31st and June 1st, so
Yeah.
you can get tickets online. We've been doing guest announcements.
Yeah, we got some really cool
We've
guests.
got a big guest announcement coming up here in about another week.
So make sure that you like us on Facebook and Instagram and
Twitter.
I don't know about that one,
Okay.
but
Alright.
we are on a
Well,
bunch
TikTok
of
is the
different.
one that's going away.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe we
we'll
don't
see
know
what
yet.
happens. But you never know. Everything's up in the air. I never believe anything until it's absolutely
Right,
final.
exactly.
So, anyways, check us out on all of our different
Yep.
social medias and like and share all of our stuff. This is our very first podcast. Hopefully, it went well. We
Yep.
hope that you enjoyed it. We tried to share as much as feasibly possible with you for our very first one. And I asked you to do this. I'd like to have a segment that always ends, like we have an ending segment. I'd like to have
Right.
that.
Sure.
So my ending segment for this one is: who are your top 5 origin stories? Who are your favorite? What are your favorite ones? Give me your top 5. Who do you really like? That you're like, man, that origin story is pretty awesome.
Me.
Yeah. Okay, next 4.
Captain America is always one of my favorite origin stories. Because you and I are both ex-military.
Yes.
And Captain America's a soldier, and he was created to fight the Nazis. With the super soldier serum. So
Yep.
definitely Captain America.
Okay, Cap.
Yep, Cap definitely. Green Lantern. When I was a kid, I used to dream that the ring came to me,
Right.
and I could fly all over the galaxy and
Right.
create, the big boxing glove and
Right.
everything else.
Yeah. And who was the very first Green Lantern? Who's like the original Green Lantern?
Alan Scott.
Alan Scott.
Yeah. Created
right?
1940 by Martin
And
Odell.
then there's John Stewart.
Well, Hal Jordan was next.
I know, but I'm
Right.
saying Alan Scott, John Stewart,
Mhm.
Alan Stewart.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Actually, so we'll talk about this in a few. We'll do a Green Lantern episode definitely.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
He's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
But my son is named after 3 Green Lanterns.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Kyle Allen Stewart.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, so you got Cap, Green Lantern,
Yeah.
and who else? Who else you got in your?
Oh
your 3
boy.
left?
Batman is obviously Batman is just
Yep.
badass.
Okay. Yeah.
And so definitely Batman.
Got 2 more.
Spider-Man.
All right.
Spider-Man is cool. Being a high school kid, I mean, he was the first superhero that was a teen, that was the main superhero that was not a
The
sidekick.
sidekick.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was the first mainstream teen superhero that was not a sidekick.
Which is pretty cool.
Yep, and that was thanks to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko.
And I know you have a ton of other ones in your head.
Yep.
Just pull one more.
One more.
One
Oh,
more
one
cool
more.
origin story.
Let's see here.
Doesn't have to be superhero.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
I've always thought the Phantom has a really interesting origin story because I like that, each one of his sons that, he's known as the ghost who walks, they think he's immortal, but it's each generation takes over to perpetuate that
Yeah.
myth,
Right.
over from the 1500s to now.
So somebody takes up the mantle every
Exactly.
time.
Yeah,
Right.
I've always just thought the Phantom was so interesting that way
That's
because
cool.
when they would do the comics, he's got like the big journal
Yeah.
that tells all the exploits of the past ones. So when they would do like the stories like was fighting the pirates or fighting the Nazis or fighting, you know, I always loved those past Phantom stories.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Mine are Batman, obviously. This is one of my favorites, and everybody knows that origin story. I don't have to tell you.
Right.
Spider-Man also made my list.
Okay.
Just because he was part of the reason that he needed to be responsible.
Right.
You know, it's because of him that something big happened, that he had to change his way. Instead of trying to make money as Spider-Man, he needed to actually have some responsibility.
Exactly.
Harley Quinn.
Oh, okay.
Just the whole Florence Nightingale effect of her being with Joker,
Right.
and then she can't stop, and
Right.
you know, she becomes obsessed.
Okay.
You know, so I really like that one. I like.
Now, you said heroes, though, didn't you?
I said no. I just said origin stories.
Okay.
I
All
just said
right. All
origin
right. All
stories.
right. I just want to make sure we're.
And yeah, no, we're
Okay.
fine. And then I do enjoy The Flash because it's such kind of a ridiculous story. Because
Right.
it's got to be the right chemicals and the
Right,
lightning.
exactly.
Everything has to happen perfectly.
It was all by chance.
It's all by absolute chance,
Right.
which is why the worst origin story is Kid Flash.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing happened again.
Exactly.
And it's like, now I can't buy the first one. And I'm
Right.
fine, you know, I'm fine. It's fine. I'll be fine. But The Flash, I like that one, but then, anyways. But Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah.
Now, Wonder Woman has her original origin story, and then Azzarello, when he did New 52, he
Right.
changed the story.
So I prefer the original.
Which I know you do, and it's not that I don't like the original
Okay.
story. I'm saying I really enjoyed how he reimagined that whole idea that, if you haven't read it, I don't care. Spoiler alert. I don't know. Stop it right here. I
We've
don't
had
know.
enough time. It's not really considered a spoiler.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. But she's made out of clay, and basically her mom
Right.
lies to her the entire time because she is actually Zeus's daughter.
Right.
Now, before it was Zeus gave the clay baby life, but Azzarello changed it to her mother had been lying to her the whole time, and she was actually, she had relations with Zeus, and then she becomes a god.
Now, do you know about the origin story in between those two from the 80s
Yeah,
with
there
George
was-
Perez? And Hercules is her father.
Right, yeah.
And that origin story. So
Yeah.
they've changed it multiple times.
Yeah, I like the newest one.
Right.
Because she is a god, and I like the idea that her bracelets actually hold her power back,
Right.
and that kind of, if she wants to, if she takes them off, she's actually super powerful.
Right.
So I enjoy that.
Right.
Anyways, cool top 5.
Yep.
I'm glad you indulged me in that. Anyways, Hall of Heroes History Podcast. I'm John Osborne. This is Alan Stewart, and we just thank you for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe. And hope you had a good time and enjoy your comics.